Major breaking news, Wayne LaPierre, the Chief Executive Officer, the Executive Director, the boss of the National Rifle Association, has resigned today on the eve of a fraud trial in New York City's New York Supreme Court, which is the lowest trial court in Manhattan. Now, we're not going to talk about the details of the resignation, the retirement, or that trial right now. What I'm going to do instead is talk about if I were in charge of hiring the next head of the NRA, what are some of the considerations that I would be considering and looking for in the next head of the NRA? These are things that some of you out there might be interested in hearing. Stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say a top 5 finalist in 2 separate categories for the 2024 Gundy Awards out in Las Vegas. First category is Top Male Influencer in the Second Amendment space, and the other category is Top Voice of the Second Amendment. I am proud and honored, and thank you all for your support. It was very unexpected, but I'm happy to have gotten to the top 5 finalists for both categories. All right, so breaking news, Wayne LaPierre, the longtime head of the National Rifle Association, has resigned, citing health concerns on the eve of a major civil, I repeat, civil fraud trial in New York City, in Manhattan, in New York Supreme Court, which is the trial court in the state of New York. This is a state court case. We're not going to dwell on the reasons for the resignation other than, again, Wayne LaPierre indicated that he was resigning for health reasons, and given the fact that he's in his 70s, that's not a shock. That does happen. I imagine you do get tired in your 70s, especially when you have a high-pressure, high-profile, difficult job such as running the NRA. So I can understand that that may, in fact, be true, and I could understand why that may be the case. So with that said, obviously the NRA is going to have to move forward. I'm sure they have an interim plan in place. They have, excellent folks over there still, and I'm sure they and the board have figured out the next steps. But I do want to give you sort of my thoughts that I have no connection to the NRA. I'm not an officer, not a director. I don't work for them or anything like that. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, and I cheer for the NRA, but I have no connection to the NRA. Never really have had anything like that in any respect. I don't even think I've been to an NRA convention, which is shame on me, by the way. Nevertheless, let us carry on. And let me say, if I was retained or asked by the NRA what I'd be looking for leadership, what are the sorts of things I would want to consider in the next person to run the NRA? These are the categories or the things that I would want to look for to see where the person's mindset was on what his or her proposed plan would be on these various topics. Now, I will say, just before we get into the discussion of this job, as I see it, keep in mind, as I see it, there's really 2 roles at the head of the NRA. There's the Charlton Heston role, which is really a public relations role. It's like a Tom Selleck, Charlton Heston, Oliver North, someone very high profile, very famous, very media savvy, that can go out there and be sort of the celebrity endorser of the NRA. So in terms of that role, the kinds of people that I might be thinking about, and again, they may have no interest. It may not make sense for a lot of reasons I'm just not familiar with, but I'll just throw out a couple names. I think, people that are very good on guns, like, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, obviously both very big proponents of the Second Amendment, high profile names. They're the kinds of people that you could consider in terms of being that high profile influencer. And of course, there's many others. I don't need to go through that list of people. You probably can come up with your list. But again, that's the sort of person that I would be thinking about. I'm not saying they're the people specifically, but that's the sort of thought I would have about who might fill that sort of celebrity, Tom Selleck, Oliver North, Charlton Heston role of high-profile celebrity, PR kind of face of the NRA. Now, in terms of the Wayne LaPierre role, it's a different role. So you have the celebrity role, yes, but then you have sort of the nuts and bolts CEO style role. These are this person is going to basically function as the person that's responsible for hiring, firing, setting the mission, deciding where the agenda should go, where the money should be spent, and so on and so on. For that role, which is not a high-profile celebrity role necessarily, it's more of, I would say, a worker bee functionary role, very important role, but but a CEO role overseeing the organization. And if I were going to interview someone for that particular position, this is the sort of thing I would be asking them. I think as I see it, there's about 6 areas or buckets of considerations and work that I would be thinking is very important, at least from my perspective. In no particular order, I'm not going to go in the right order. I think they're all equally important for different reasons. I think the first thing I would want to make sure is they really understood the importance of scholarship. Scholarship meaning I want to make sure that they would be willing to invest in both historical scholarship and also social science work. Historical scholarship is very important because our rights right now hang in the balance in the court system, and the courts right now are looking for historical scholarship and historical work, and to some degree social science work, although social science, which is the good and the bad of the guns, is not supposed to be considered by the courts because the Bruin and Heller case both threw out interest balancing. The reality is judges and decision makers are people too. They can be swayed by emotional appeals. They shouldn't, because appeals to emotion, of course, are logically fallacious. They are logical fallacies, but the reality is, as I see it, you have to invest in scholarship both from the historical meaning of the Second Amendment, the legal scholarship. You got to invest in that. And at the same time, you want to invest in social science work to make sure that you can show that guns are a positive for society in all respects, to counter the sort of things we see coming out of the public health world, out of the CDC world, out of the Joe Biden world, of really guns are bad constantly. So that's the first thing. Scholarship would be the first category I'd want to talk about. The second category, and again, I'm not going in any specific order in terms of ranking. I'm just listing them as I think of them. The second category is very, very important. Make sure you're investing in high quality, mission-oriented, mission-focused, mission-aligned litigators and litigation. It is pretty clear that, as we've covered on this channel, lawsuits are mission critical. We have to make sure that our rights are protected in the courts, especially in those terrible blue states that are trying to create precedent to steal our gun rights, because there is very little doubt that the anti-gunners, as I wrote about in my book, First They Came for the Gun Owners, that there's very little doubt that the anti-gun movement wants to take away our right of free speech and all of our other rights first, and then, of course, quickly segue in to take away our right to keep and bear arms. So they want to take away our ability to defend the right to keep and bear arms on the airwaves, on the internet, and so on, and then, of course, use that as part of an effort to take away and disarm us, which will convert us quickly from being American citizens into American serfs or American subjects, or perhaps even worse. So with that said, I would want to make sure that the organization and the person in charge of the NRA was laser focused on hiring mission-focused, mission-aligned, high-quality lawyers all around the country. That would be the second thing, to understand the importance of litigation and lawsuits to defend our rights all across the board in all the courts, state and federal, in this great country. The third thing, of course, and again, I'm not telling you specifically how I would do it through 501c3s, through the organization, through PACs. I'm not going to get into those level of details here. I'm just giving you the general thoughts here. There's people out there that can do the fine legal details. Don't need to do that for the purposes of this video right here. I think the third category is, of course, lobbying. It's very important the organization, the NRA, would have boots on the ground in every state house, in Congress, and everywhere that there's the ability to influence decision makers. They should be laser focused on all of that. That's obviously a major area of investment, because lobbying is extremely important in today's world. Obviously, we understand in many parts of the country, and generally in the country as a whole, the country is sort of dividing between the red states and the blue states, and the notion of blue dog Democrats, meaning Democrats that were conservative, those are a dying breed. With the Joe Manchins of the world, to the extent you ever consider him conservative in any respect, but you get the point. So certainly you need to have a very strong lobby, and I would want to understand exactly what that person thinks about how they would engage in making sure that the NRA has the best lobbyists on the planet. High quality, mission-aligned lobbyists, mission critical, that would be an important third area. The fourth area is what I call public relations, because the Second Amendment, just like anyone else, needs very powerful public relations support, public relation agents and the like. Just like the Second Amendment needs powerful and great lawyers, they also need good PR agents. So I would be focused on how do you promote the public relations associated with the Second Amendment. And part of this, by the way, I would include is promoting gun culture. Promote gun culture. It's not just any old gun culture like hunting, which of course is very important. It's also making sure we promote not just the hunting culture, but also the sporting culture of firearms, as well as self-defense. Because what makes the United States unique is not just the fact that we're a gun culture. As I talk about in my book, First They Came for the Gun Owners, it's not just gun culture that's key. It's the particular type of gun culture we have in the United United States. Specifically, we have a private, self-defense oriented gun culture. We don't have gun culture like you might see in northern England, where people go hunting for foxes in the lake. That's a gun culture, yes, but that's not the American gun culture. The American gun culture, going back to the 18th century, again, it's very specific and it's unique. It's a private gun culture. It's a self-defense oriented gun culture. And that is what we want to make sure is laser focused. And that, I think, is, again, part of the public relations effort. Now, of course, on a related note, and I think this kind of goes with it, very strong efforts at education. Now, this education, as I see it, one of the things that's changed dramatically, and I applaud, for example, my fellow finalists and others that were nominated for the Gundy Awards for 2024. Just as an example, all those people out there, and there's many, many more than me, obviously, and they do a great job talking about guns, gun culture, the Second Amendment, all of this YouTube, all of these blogs, all of these websites to really talk about the importance of the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. This is just expanded and proliferated across this great country. And to encourage this decentralization and to encourage others to take up the mantle of freedom. So a big part of what I think the person who's retained by the NRA to be the new head should make sure that they are working closely and encouraging this sort of ongoing proliferation. I call it force multiplication. Many of you who used to work in the military or you were special forces, you know exactly what I mean when I talk about the phrase force multiplier. In fact, I sometimes have used it in connection with my Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, which is what my goal here is. I don't care if you quote me or use me or anything like that, but I know that if you take my education, the information that I give you, I don't need the credit. I don't care if you quote me or cite to me or give me credit. I don't care. I just want you to go out there and win for our rights, for our Constitution, for our Second Amendment. So the information I provide to you, as I see it, I'd like to think that I help force multiply the Second Amendment movement. So I give you information here. You, in turn, can go to your gun clubs. You can go to your bars. You can go to your poker games. Whatever it is that you go to, your social clubs, your family Thanksgiving dinners, it doesn't matter. You go out there and you become the smartest person in the room. It's not just a catchy line that I made up. It's what I earnestly really mean, because I can't be in every room all over the country, and nor would you want me to be there. But you can be in some of these rooms, and it's your opportunity to explain some of the things that I've helped hopefully educate you on so that you get to be the smartest person in the room. You hold the room. You explain what the Second Amendment means. You explain our history of this great country and the purpose of the right to keep and bear arms, and you become the person that people defer to in your community, whether it be in a poker room, whether it be in your town hall, whether it be in your school, whether it be on your college campus, whether it be, in Congress, whoever you are out there. And I think that the big thing that the person that is hired by the NRA should be all about force multiplication, that the NRA should not just be about doing it all themselves. It should be about, yes, doing a heavy lifts. And if the NRA has to do a particular thing because only they can do it, they should do it. But to the extent they can sort of outsource and force multiply their efforts all across the country with Second Amendment supporters all across this great country, that to me is a big part of what the next head of the NRA should be thinking about as I see it. And of course, with education, that also includes of course, encouraging firearms training, firearms safety, the Eddie Eagle program, all these sorts of things, of course, should continue onwards and upwards as I see it. The last point I want to make about education is to recognize that the vast majority of establishment educators are anti-gun or unfamiliar with firearms. They're working in public schools. They've been trained by education schools in colleges by the likes of Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard, or by the likes of Dr. Jill Biden, Joe Biden's wife, who has a degree in, yes, education. So we have to, if I were looking to someone to run the NRA, I would want to make sure that they understood the importance of getting out there to not necessarily the public school systems. You can try, but I would really laser focus on alternative means of education. I would encourage them, or I would be looking for them to talk about how they would touch fingers with, let's say, the homeschool movement in the United States, private schools, charter schools, any of these sorts of things, which are really an alternative way to get the information out there. I would want to make sure that they invest heavily with existing YouTube channels. And by the way, I'm not looking for a sponsorship or anything like that, so don't misinterpret. I don't have sponsors and I don't want sponsors right now, so I'm not looking for the NRA to sponsor me, just to be clear. But I would recommend, or at least I'd be looking to see whether or not the new head of the NRA would be thinking about trying to engage in a sponsorship relationship or somehow encouraging the growth of YouTube channels, Rumble channels, social media channels, all sorts of things, and take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of very powerful Second Amendment voices and Second Amendment expertise all across this great country that already exist, and to do what would be appropriate to encourage it. That could be annual meetings at the NRA headquarters. It could be periodic telephone calls with, influencers. Whatever it is, I'm sure you all have better ideas than I do, but this is the sort of thing I would be thinking about. The last idea is really, and this may have to be done through PACs. Again, I'm not giving legal advice about how to structure this, but I'm sure it can be structured. Certainly, anyone associated with the NRA would want to make sure, in my opinion, that you laser focus on getting out the vote. Again, you may have to do this through a PAC. This is a campaign finance thing I'm no expert in, so don't take my advice on this. But get out the vote operations. We've talked about this on this channel before. The left wants to put, ballot boxes, mail-in boxes. They want to put them outside welfare offices, and they want to have, motor voter laws where when you get your driver's license, even if you're not an American citizen, you're automatically registered to vote, and unless you opt out of it, you get registered to vote. And we've talked about how I believe that, as many places as possible where you go to register to get your concealed carry license, for example, you are automatically registered to vote. And if I were talking to someone about potentially taking over the NRA, I would definitely want to hear their recommendations about how to get out the vote for our voters, those that support the Second Amendment. And I would certainly be thinking about how do we get, mail-in ballot boxes to the extent they're going to be out there in the future, near gun ranges, near CCW permitting offices, near gun stores, and to make sure that the entire Second Amendment community, gets out the vote. That would be a major thing, especially encouraging any kind of early voting, banking the ballots. This, I think, given where we are in society after what happened with 2020 and COVID and the games that got played in those purple states or those states that are run by Democratic legislators, I would be laser focused on working on get out the vote of the Second Amendment vote. I think that would be a very important investment. Again, these are what I would be asking candidates about. What do they think about these issues, these problems, to see how they would react? And that's, again, I'm sure that you guys have a lot better ideas than I do, but this is how I see it. And to close, it is pretty clear that we are in a cultural war in the United States and have been for some time. There are people that undeniably want to deny us of all of our fundamental constitutional rights set forth in the Bill of Rights, and that includes the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, the First Amendment right to free speech, the First Amendment right to free press. It is really clear that the anti-Americans and the Second Amendment, the anti-gun lobby, and the like are very much interested in taking away everything that has made America great, which specifically is our long-standing and very successful constitutional republic and our constitutional system, which includes, among other things, checks and balances, federalism, and, of course, our written Bill of Rights. All of these things, of course, the left would like to destroy in the name of democracy, which, of course, as you know, the real name of democracy is mob rule, or two wolves and a sheep looking to vote on what's for dinner. The founding fathers were very worried about mob rule, and they designed a system as best they could to try to prevent pure democracy from taking away our rights and enslaving us through government tyranny. So with all this said, again, I have no involvement with hiring anyone at the NRA or anything like that, but I'm just letting you know, in light of this news that Wayne LaPierre has resigned from the NRA, these are some of the considerations I would be thinking about if I were involved with retaining or hiring the next head or heads of the National Rifle Association. All right, folks, hope you learned a little bit something here today. We'll keep you informed as the NRA continues to move forward. And again, don't forget to subscribe. Follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner. Make sure you resubscribe if you haven't, because a lot of times you get knocked off the list, so I'm told. And again, we will see you in soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.